And it's interesting. We were talking during the break. Let's really hone in on this and zero in on this. You played for Mike Shanahan, dad of Kyle, and he is still remains, Mike Shanahan, one of your very best friends.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And first off, 17 years. We've talked about this before, but I had 3 years on injured reserve.
Damn.
So, but they still count. So I get 17 years. But yeah, Mike Shanahan's still one of my very best friends. Heck, when he was the coach of the Raiders back in 88, 89, he was there for 20 games. I was the L.A. Raiders. I was the young up-and-coming quarterback, supposedly. And Kyle was a 5 or 6 year old ball boy for us. So I've known Kyle since he was, in kindergarten. And just have seen his development through the years and really, really happy for what's going on right now for him. I know Mike is extremely proud. I was texting Mike during the game the other day, Mike and his wife Peggy, and you could see the pride in his face for what his son is accomplishing, and he's just done a great job all the way through.
Yeah, Kyle definitely deserves the credit, but Mike has had influence. Mike was very intense. He's been very successful in real estate post-football. Mike's a very successful, smart guy. Kyle is super bright. Mm-hmm. Do you see a little of Mike and Kyle's coaching?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think the whole coaching philosophy comes from Mike. It starts with Mike. And then you go through the different other people that have had influence on him. And, Gary Kubiak, who he was the coordinator for in in Houston, excuse me. And then Kyle's kind of branched off on his way in Atlanta and kind of developed his own system, so to speak. But it's all based off the philosophies that Mike instilled in guys like Gary Kubiak and that whole tree of coaches that has come from there. And Kyle has just taken it to the next level.
So in the last, 14 passes for Garoppolo in the last 6 quarters.
Right.
Did you ever play on a team with a powerful running game and you knew you had to make very few throws, but you had to be ready for it? At one point, Garoppolo, I think Joe Buck and Troy Aikman said he hasn't thrown a pass in over an hour.
It was amazing. I mean, we were doing the math. I was sitting with Trent Green in New York watching that game. And it had been, I think, his last pass in the first half was with 2 or 3 minutes left. And I don't know if he threw a pass in the third quarter. And then he threw 1 or 2. That completion he had to Kittle. The crossing route in the beginning of the fourth quarter, I think, was his next pass.
That's not always easy, though, Steve.
No, it's not easy.
It's like asking somebody, in the NBA, like Kobe Bryant, shooters like to be shooters shoot. Give me in a rhythm. To ask a quarterback, okay, we need a huge third down throw. Did you ever play on a team like that?
Well, I played with Emmitt Smith at the Dallas Cowboys, so we fed it to Emmitt pretty regularly, without a doubt. But never that kind of a period of time, I don't think, in a big game like that. But I don't think Kyle planned it that way. I think Kyle said, we're going to come out, we're going to run the football. He always plans on running first, and all the big plays come off of the play action, those bootlegs and the semi-bootlegs where they set up and throw it back across the field. Jimmy's made all those throws all year. I'm sure that was a big part of the game plan. They didn't expect Mostert to go untouched into the end zone 4 times. I don't think it was a lot easier running the football against that team, the Green Bay Packers, the other night than they expected it to be. But everything, definitely, you can mark my words, it started with getting that run game established, because it always does.
We were talking about bad ownership, and I had dinner last night with an executive that just got let go from a wildly dysfunctional organization. And he didn't have any resentment toward the former owner, but it was crazy town, just not well run. And I've been saying this, is that Joe Burrow's talented, but I don't think he's talented enough, and I said this about Baker Mayfield, to overcome dysfunction. I think Trevor Lawrence is. I think there's guys like Russell Wilson, Mahomes. There are Andrew Luck overcame a lot of dysfunction.
Sure.
Those guys are once a decade. Okay, Marino. Did you ever have a situation? You were in Oakland. There was some dysfunction with Al Davis.
Heck yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, it was. You can argue either side of that. I mean, he ran that organization, built that organization. They had tremendous success through the 70s. But then, as the game evolved, he was kind of stuck in his Raider way, and that we all paid the price for that. I got caught up in that myself, and Mike Shanahan was brought in to be the coach to kind of catch the Raiders up offensively and kind of take it to the new philosophical level where the offensive game was going at that time. The problem was Al Davis couldn't back out. He had to keep his hand in the game and wanted to be involved and still wanted to have his handprints on that football team. And it kind of magnified when they made the trade for Jay Schroeder. Mike Shanahan had committed to me to be the starting quarterback in 1988. Al Davis made the trade for Jay Schroeder after we beat the San Diego Chargers on opening day in the 1988 season. Mike Shanahan knew nothing about it.
Oh, Lord.
The trade was made for Jay Schroeder. And then it became a battle of Al Davis wanted Jay Schroeder, Mike Shanahan wanted me.
And you're in the middle of it.
It lasted 20 games. And who do you think won? The owner won. The owner won.
That is insane.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
could you sense that Mike Shanahan was struggling with Al?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. The whole team knew what was going on. It was Mike Shanahan's first job as a head coach.
How
in
frustrating
the NFL.
would that be?
Yeah, and he was brought in to catch the Raiders up to the new wave of offensive football, but he wasn't given that opportunity, and it worked out great for Mike. I mean, he came out of it okay, I think, when you look back on the whole thing, but it was a very difficult start for him and all of us that lived through. That was right when Marcus Allen was going through all of his stuff with Al Davis as well.
That was nonsense.
And no one could ever question the motivation for Al Davis. He wanted to win.
Oh, there's no question.
Commitment to excellence and all that stuff. It was real.
You know, it's one of the things, I see this a lot. I always say, if you don't evolve in marriage, business, life, like you got to constantly adapt. And it is hard, Steve, when you've been super successful in life.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry's got $8 billion in the bank, right? And then all of a sudden, people are like, no, you got to change. And Jerry's like,
excuse me? Yeah.
I quadrupled the value of this franchise.
Right.
And I think Al Davis felt like he'd been called a pioneer.
Right.
He was, at one point, at the end, he was one of the poorest owners. But for a long time, he was celebrated as a maverick by the media.
Right. And I think that he was probably the model that if you were to ask Jerry Jones, who was the most impactful owner or owners that he dealt with in his early days, and I'm sure Al Davis would have been one of the first names that would come out.
By the way, you dealt with Jerry, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I went from the Raiders to Dallas.
And what was he like? What was the young Jerry like?
Well, I loved playing for the Cowboys at that time, and Jimmy Johnson. I didn't think I would like Jimmy Johnson because of the Notre Dame Miami history.
Yeah,
and I was really deep caught up in that, and Jimmy won me over right away, though, and he was really the guy. No matter what anybody says, he was the guy that was really molding those teams and shaping those teams and the brains behind what was going on there. And we all knew it. We all played very hard for Jimmy. Jerry ran a first-class operation and was involved, I'm sure, in a lot of the stuff. But he was learning how to be an owner at that point.
Jimmy wasn't learning how to be a coach.
Jimmy already knew how to be a coach, and knew how to build a team.
Yeah, by the way, when Jimmy got elected live on TV to the Hall of Fame, I said this, cool. I do a Sunday show, NFL Kickoff. I do it so I can come in and talk to Howie and Jimmy and Strahan and all these guys, right, about football and Terry Bradshaw. I've never learned more football from anybody in my life than Jimmy. So I just could not be happier. Steve Berline, 17 years in the NFL. Just ripping him off is what I was doing. Hour 3 next.